lovelies, my name is Jessica and welcome to Makeup.misfit. So this video is if I had to keep one or if I had to declutter one. Now I saw this from Dub's Beauty Diary, and when I watched her video the other day, yesterday, I was like really looking forward to filming my own. So here we are. Basically what this is just going through all of the brands that you have more than one eyeshadow palette from, and if you had to keep one, which one would it be, and if you had to declutter one, which one would that be? So I went through my collection last night and I have 14 brands sitting here. Now I'm going to split this up into two parts. So I'm going to do 7 brands today, and then I will do 7 brands. Well, I'll film it back to back, but I'm going to do a separate video for the last 7 brands. So I'm looking forward to going through this with you guys and just letting you know what palettes I would choose to keep if I had to choose and which ones I would declutter. Now, there's no particular order to how I'm doing this. I'm just going to show you guys, and let's get into it. So first and foremost, we are going to start off with Vizier. So I technically, if you see this one right here, this is the midsummer packaging. I did use this as my Pan That palette for this year, and I have completely finished it off. So I technically had 4 palettes because I also had the Warm Edits palette. Long story with that one, I've mentioned it before, but I took it out of the packaging. I do still have the original packaging, but I took it out of there, put those shades into a magnetic palette because it wasn't quite sitting right in the original packaging, and it was getting very messy, crumbly. It was just a disaster when I got that palette. So what I've been doing is, as I was using my midsummer palette, I would take a couple shades from Warm Edits, throw it into here, round off the palette a little bit more, help myself use it. And I was also throwing shades into the Solstice palette. So that is kind of where my shades are sitting at right now. Once I completely finished off this midsummer palette, I actually just filled it with the shades from Warm Edit. So that's the first palette we're going to kind of show you is, whoops, this is part of the Warm Edit palette. And then the Solstice palette does have 4 shades from the Solstice, but it also has 4 shades from Warm Edit. So this is currently what my Solstice palette is looking like, but again, it's a mix of the two. And then I have the Violet Étendue palette, which is larger pans. So, you know, I couldn't quite combine with this one, but this is just a really pretty purple palette. Now, since I finished off the Midsummer palette, that one is not included in this, but the packaging is. So out of these 3 palettes, the one that I would declutter 110% is the Warm Edit palette. I had wanted that one for so long, and I bought that one because it reminded me of the Warm Mattes 2, I think it is, or just the Warm Mattes that I really wanted in those larger pans. And then of course they came up with those large pan palettes in mini size, so I kind of kicked myself because I should have just waited. Mind you, it's not like I would have known, but it is what it is. So I would 100% get rid of the Warm Edit palette, as just has been too much of a disaster for me. I'm not really enjoying it as much as I was hoping, and it was something that I had wanted for quite a while, so it is a bit of a disappointment. But the one palette that I would keep is the Solstice palette. I really have been enjoying using this. It has been a while since I've actually reached for it, but the duochrome in this palette was beautiful. I really enjoyed wearing these shadows as a whole, and each time I would use them, I loved the looks that came out of them. They were a little bit peachier, which I really enjoyed as well, but I just found it's a very pretty palette. It was a very easy go-to palette when I was in a rush or just kind of lazy and just wanted to throw something on. So this is definitely one that I would hold on to, possibly bring back into my collection once it's finished. I would love to hold on to that palette 100%. So I have Tarte sitting in front of me as well. So I have 3 palettes from Tarte. This is the Tartelette Toasted, the original Clay Play, and the original Tarteist Pro. So I'm going to start off and show you guys the Tartelette Toasted. This is the palette that got me into wanting and enjoying using the warm tones, because I was into cool tones right up until this came out. But I did not purchase it just until like last year, I think it was. So it took a very long time for me to actually bite the bullet and purchase this palette. I have not used it as much as I would like to, so I do want to get some more use on it. The Tarteist Pro palette, I bought this, and if you remember or if you saw, I was this is so reflective. I was using the shade Classic, so this is completely finished because I was using it to set down my lids. I did reach for this palette a little bit, but not as much as I would have liked to. This is a palette that I have thought about panning in the future. We'll see how I'm feeling later, if this is ever going to be an actual contender or not. But there's definitely a few shades in here that I would not reach for. Like these two right here, it's just too deep for me. I'm not really into the dark blue shimmers either. There's a couple of others, but I could get away with them. Those two are just a no-go. And then last is the original Clay Play palette. So this is the all neutral palette, just the brown one. They did have the Clay Play too, which had more mauves in it. But this one is probably the one that I would declutter just because I don't need this. I really don't ever use it, reach for it. I have these shades time and time again, so it's not like I really needed this palette to begin with. When I first purchased it, maybe I felt like I did, but now I just have so much that this would be the one palette that I would choose to declutter. The one that I would choose to keep, I would say, is going to be the Tarte Toasted, just because of how much I had wanted it, how long I had wanted it for, and the fact that I do want to get some more use on it to actually form a better opinion about it. But this would be the one that I would keep. So I have two palettes from Becca. I have the Becca and Jaclyn Hill, and I believe this is like the Eyelights palette. Everything is so reflective, and with this ring light, it's not making it any easier. So because I only have the two, the Becca Jaclyn Hill palette is the one that I would declutter. I purchased this at Winners, so I didn't get it when it released or anything like that. And I did enjoy using it when I used it, and I liked the looks that came out of it. This middle shade here, which I believe is Cordial, I really liked that one. I think that's like my favorite shade out of this palette. But it's not something I ever reach for. Again, this was not necessarily a contender for Pan That palette, but it was like an idea. I did kind of have it in the back of my mind that I wouldn't mind panning this one just because I want to kind of get rid of it at the same time. So this would definitely be the one that I would declutter. And then the one I would keep is this Eyelights palette. Now, the reason for that is these shadows are basically their eyeshadow, or basically their highlighters. Now, I don't know if every one of these are, but there's Opal, there's Moonstone, there's Rose Quartz, I believe. So the fact that I could actually use these as highlighters, even though I did buy backups when Becca closed, the fact that they are now closed, I would just like to hold on to this one for sure. Use it as an eyeshadow, use them as highlighters, still get the look that I enjoy. But this shade right here, Hot Chocolate, that was like my go-to shade out of this palette. Again, I haven't reached for this in a long time, but I would just use Hot Chocolate all over the lid. It was a very easy one and done look. I really enjoyed how it wore, how it looked, and I would love to hold on to that palette just for that shade alone. So we are going to chat about Pat McGrath. So I have 3 palettes from this brand as well. So this is the Mini Sublime palette. This one is Bronzed Ambition, and this one is Bronzed Temptation. So I'm just going to show you Bronzed Temptation first. I had Burning Desire from this palette in my Pan Those eyeshadows, and you can see I had hit pan on this. And I really enjoyed wearing these 2 shimmers along with that shade. Bronzed Temptation has not been used, so there is still the plastic packaging in here, the little card with the names on it. So I'm not going to take it out, but it is a little reflective. So I'm not quite sure. I would assume that the formula is the same as this one, but I have not used it yet, so I can't form an opinion on it whatsoever. And then the last one is Mini Sublime, which is an all shimmer palette. This was also a contender for Pan That palette for this year, but I did not go with this one. And this is the one that I would declutter just because it's all shimmers. This shade right here is actually in this Bronzed Temptation Ambition palette. Bronzed Ambition Temptation. I never know which is which. So this is Bronzed Temptation. It is in this palette. This is the one I would keep. This is the one I would declutter. I just really liked wearing the mattes and the shimmers in here together. That Burning Desire shade. Yes, there's a couple of shades in here that I wouldn't want to use. So this may overrank this one eventually, but I would like to get use on this one prior to being able to make that claim. But that's what those shades are looking like. So I think that this would probably be the one in the end, but because I haven't used it yet and I really enjoyed using this one, this is the one I would hold on to. So that is, what, 4 brands so far? So we've got 3 more to go. So I have 2 palettes from Lethal Cosmetics. So this is the After Dark palette and this is the Velvet Dusk. So After Dark is the one that I would keep for sure. It is lighter and brighter and they're 90s vibes. So I really enjoy the color story in here. Of course, there's a couple shades that I'm a little iffy about, but I feel like I would get more use on this palette than the other one, which I'll show you in a second. But I really enjoy using this as well. I used a few of these shades in a couple of projects, or one project I believe, and I really didn't like the formula and everything of it. And then this is Velvet Dusk, and the reason being this is the one I would declutter is because it's a little too dark for me, that's all. It is very grungy. It is perfect for like fall winter time, but this shade I will never use. This one I will probably never use. I'm actually looking forward to using this one. I have used this one in Pan Those Eyeshadows and I did like it, so it's not like I don't like this palette at all. But color story wise, this is the one that I would probably get rid of just because I feel like there's more shades in here that I would not use compared to the compared to the After Dark palette. All right, so 2 more brands. We're gonna go with Juvias Place. So again, I only have 2. I have the Zulu and I have the Tribe. Now this is kind of this is the one that I would get rid of. I have kind of thought about it, but just because people were so like in love with this palette, the only reason I would get rid of this one over the Zulu is again kind of color story. I would not reach for these 2 shades at all. A couple like this row, these ones right here I would probably do. This one might be a little bit difficult for me. No, this green one might be a little bit difficult for me. But really the oranges, the brown, I could use that no problem. But these 2 blues here, I would just never get any use out of. And then the Zulu palette, the reason why I would actually hold on to this one, just besides color story, is this pink shimmer. I actually really liked wearing it all over the lid just as a one and done look. I did that a couple of years ago and I really, really enjoyed it. So I feel like I would get a lot more use out of this palette than I would the Tribe palette. And also this green shimmer was in my Pan Those Eyeshadows, and if you saw in the Velvet Dusk palette, it had a green shimmer in there as well. So what I had done was this shade was in my color story with the purple from Velvet Dusk, and I was pairing those 2 together. But the green shimmer in here would have done the exact same thing. So there are a couple of shades in here that I'm a little iffy about as well, but that pink shimmer is the one that would really make me hold on to this palette over the Tribe palette. And last but not least, we're just gonna go with these little Essence palettes. So I have Coral Me Maybe and Bronze This Way. Now, this isn't a spoiler because you guys would have already seen the video, it has gone up. So Coral Me Maybe, I've used a little bit more than I've actually used Bronze Temptation. So I had this, I believe it was called In My Way. I had this in Pan Those Eyeshadows. You can see that I have hit pan on here, but I have used a majority of these shades more than I used what has been in Bronze Temptation, or Bronze This Way, which if I'm not throwing it around, I will show you in a second. So I do enjoy the peachy corally tones, so I think this is the one that I would actually hold on to. And the one that I would get rid of is the Bronze This Way. And again, I have more pan in here than I do Coral Me Maybe, but that's because this shade here was in Pan Those Eyeshadows, and right now I'm using this shade to set down my lid. So you would have seen that in my bonus pans video, so this is not a spoiler, but those are the only 2 shades that I have actually used in this palette. So even though I have more pan in here than I do here, I have more usage on the shades as a whole than I do this Bronze Temptation palette, or this Bronze This Way palette. And I just feel like if I had to choose, I would much rather use this one to kind of even lighten up a shade or throw a different tone into a look, opposed to just using a very neutral palette. So that is everything for this video. Sorry, it's been a little like jumpy, but we are ready to go on to the next 7 brands. So stay tuned for that one if you're interested in watching, and I will see you guys all later. Bye.